Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Creator Hangout with Kickstarter, a weekly series of live Q&As with creators from our community. My name is Liz Cook. I'm the documentary film lead at Kickstarter, and I'm here with Elaine McMillion. Hello.
Hi. Good, how are you?
Elaine,
Sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Elaine is a multi-award-winning documentary filmmaker, visual artist, visual journalist, and works with several different medias. It's clear that you have a real gift for storytelling, sort of regardless of the medium and the format, non-linear versus linear storytelling. And I'm really excited to talk to you about your Kickstarter project and your work in general. But before we get started, I want to make sure to mention that we'll be taking questions live here on Google Plus and Twitter via @KickstarterTips. So feel free to send in any questions that you have along the way. But while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I thought I would just get us started. Your Kickstarter project for the interactive documentary Hollow, I wanted to just sort of start off there just because there's just so many moving parts and it's pretty expansive. Maybe you could take a little time to sort of introduce what the whole premise of that project is.
Yeah, so Hollow is an interactive documentary. It's a new genre of documentary filmmaking, and you're primarily seeing the projects come out of Canada with the National Film Board of Canada and in France with Arte and other funders like that. And so Hollow was one of the first independent American interactive documentaries. And so Kickstarter was an obvious route to crowdfund because we produced it in 2012, and there were a couple new funders in the field, like the Tribeca Film Institute's New Media Fund, but really it was sort of a new field, and we had to figure out ways to fund it. And so what interactive documentary means is that it's a web native documentary split into 5 different chapters, 30 short films, data visualizations, and pieces within each of the chapters that allow the user to add their story into the experience. So it's extremely interactive, non-linear in the sense that there's these linear chapters that you can jump around and sort of choose your own adventure through. And then it has a back end side of it where the community that it features, which is the residents of McDowell County, West Virginia, they've lost 80% of their population since 1950. It's a coal community. They are updating their stories through the WordPress tool that's built in. So yeah, it's a huge project, moving project. And when I put it on Kickstarter, I had done 2 Kickstarters before, but they were for linear films. And I guess I would say it wasn't super important at that time with this genre to stress that this was interactive. Like, we tried to explain in simple terms what interactive meant, but we just tried to say, like, we're telling this story and this is why you should fund it, rather than bogging people down with details of the technology that was going to be used and those types of things.
So with so many different moving parts and people participating in sort of the development of the content, how much do you, as sort of the orchestrator and lead there, like, how do you even begin to map that kind of thing out?
Yeah, well, it sort of takes away the role of the traditional documentary director role, right? Because you're giving up a lot of control to a community that's participating and creating content. And then the director role is also sharing half of the position with a designer. Jeff Soik was our designer, and he was in many ways sort of like the cinematographer of the interactive experience, where, he sort of mapped out how the stories would play out on the website. And so it was really teamwork of working with Jeff and then 2 developers, Russell Goldenberg and Robert Haw, and then a great sound designer and 2 editors, Sarah Ginsberg and Kern Sheldon. Sarah's who I do the podcast with. So it was a big team effort of looking at all these different stories. And really, I was there for 6 months. So I raised close to $29,000 on Kickstarter, and that was all the money we had at that time. And I was applying for grants the whole time while I was shooting, but I just tried to spend as little money as possible. So I only spent like $10,000 in the production side of things. I shot everything myself, all the photos, all the sound, all the video, just got up every single day and was shooting. And I knew I only had 6 months to collect this footage. And then I came back to Boston, and that's when we all started looking at it and trying to shape it into what it is now.
It's incredible. What I really loved so much about Hollow was like how rooted it was in a sort of specific time and place. And, you know, in terms of running a Kickstarter project that's sort of centered really directly to a geographic location and a specific population, how did that affect the way you ran your outreach? Was it, I mean, I imagine you mostly target that community, but you know, it obviously, the themes in what you're exploring span to cities across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And before I start any project, I put Google alerts on topics that I'm wanting to explore in that documentary or whatever it may be. And so I'm trying to read as much local news and national news about what's already being said about the issues I want to cover, so that the context is there. I understand what's being said, how it's being communicated, and maybe a better way to communicate it. But also in that process, I'm reading these articles and I'm finding people that are interested in these topics. So in that process, 4 months leading into Kickstarter, I had made a list of 200 people who were speaking out about rural issues of poverty, education, these types of things. And so I reached out to those people before the Kickstarter launched, and I said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to fundraise for this project. I read that you cared about this issue in this article. I would just like to introduce myself and the project, and hope that when I send the link for the fundraising, you'll help us, either in spreading the word or donating." And so I had already made touch points with those people. And some of them didn't respond, but many of them did. And so when we launched the Kickstarter, what was interesting is the people that found me. And that's because it's very personal driven, and we tried to make it as personal driven. I mean, I'm from the county next door where I was documenting, and the story is very much, it's sort of like Hollow, sort of like a love and hate letter I have to the state. And so we really tried to express the personalized version of that by targeting brain drainers, young people who've left rural communities all over the country. And those people are in the cities. They're in New York and LA and everywhere else. And so it actually was interesting because I'm not sure how we found them because I was looking in so much of the research mode. But once we found one, we saw the community just sort of spread. It was just like one person told another. Even if they're from like Iowa, they could relate to it. And so that was really cool. And you have a lot of like brain drainers that write for like the Daily Dot. The guy who wrote the article at the Daily Dot was from West Virginia, and he was a brain drainer. And so that was cool to find the young people that could help us spread the word through Kickstarter. And then once we were in the post-production process, we actually sent out a survey to all of our Kickstarter backers to ask them, try to get to deeper meaning of why they donated. What were they looking for? What were the priorities? We had them created this quick survey, like, why did you donate? Was it the stories? Was it the interactive form? Or was it, this issue, the topic? And most people said the stories of the people. And so we knew that the interactive thing, the whole side of it wasn't really why it was being funded. And so that made the whole design process more clear for us, put the story before the technology. And we did another survey with them. So yeah, the Kickstarter backers were like, they became part of the community. They're still, I've made friends from my backers, and like we do hang out now. And but the coolest part is when we launched, they were there to like tweet and Facebook it. And, like, they were huge, they were sharing it like crazy once it was launched. So
very cool. And did you get any were any of the backers or people that sort of surfaced from your Kickstarter experience, like anyone who ended up being content creators as well as part of the project?
Yeah, there were. Oh, you mean for Hollow?
Yeah.
Think about that. We definitely had backers who, because one of our rewards was if you give a certain amount, you could host a screening. And so we had a lot of collaborators in that sense that would set up screenings at either the university they worked at or the town. And so in that way we had collaborators, but I can't think of any that actually created content. We did have people who donated and actually came down to volunteer and help train residents to shoot content, because that was part of Hollow, was training residents. That was part of the money that we used from Kickstarter, was to buy cameras for the community. So yeah, that was fun. And then one other thing that was interesting, the very first donor, I think it's from New Zealand or Australia. And he was like, I just found this. It seems pretty familiar to some things I'm, aware of here in my own country. And so I like messaged him immediately and was like, thank you so much. You're the first backer. And I wrote sort of emails that could be short and longer emails that could be tweaked to be sent to everyone very quickly so that I could, thank them without spending a lot of time doing it. And he donated, I think maybe 10 or 25. And then once I emailed him, he said something like, I didn't expect to hear from anyone. I've never heard from anyone after donating. And next thing I know, I got an email that he upped his donation. And that actually happened several other times, where just showing someone you appreciate the fact that they're giving $25. And sometimes people just like to know that their act is appreciated, and he raised his donation. So that was a pretty cool lesson to be learned.
Absolutely. That's amazing. It's also amazing to me that a project like that is, so rooted in one specific community. Like, you'll get a guy from New Zealand as your first backer. I love that so much. So when you were thinking about, how to put the page together, because maybe interactive documentary isn't a term that everybody would know, and you kind of want to be able to focus on the content rather than sort of the logistics and technical part of what it is and what it means. How do you balance that, or how would you suggest people who have sort of less traditional forms of what they're doing, how would you balance story with the technical aspects of what you're putting together?
Well, if what you're making is visual, you need a good video. I mean, that's just hands down really obvious. I mean, at the end of the day, Hollow it's a website, but I think of it more as a film. It's just a new form of a film. So I wanted the video to be pretty filmic. So we tried to, I went down and shot stuff specifically for the Kickstarter video. And I would also say that in the sort of, hierarchy of the stuff you're listing, make sure the story and your message and what you're trying to get across is the most central thing. And then have explainers. We did little bolded sections like, what is an interactive documentary? And then we listed out links of like things you could go explore that would maybe give you a sense of what this was, even though it wouldn't look anything like that. It was like, this is what's happening right now in the genre that would help explain it. So yeah, I think you just have to know your story really well before you do any Kickstarter. And I think in documentary, it's especially true to know your audience, know the people that care about your issue and the topic. And if you can communicate that well, then you're going to have a much easier campaign than if you're trying to figure that out in the middle of your campaign. Because I see a lot of people not being prepared when they're launching the Kickstarter. They may have a great video, but they're not sure who to even send it to beyond their social network, their immediate social network. And your social capital will deplete pretty quickly. So you need to really expand out to the other, bubbles that are connected to the issue that maybe aren't connected to you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you find the updates tool, like having used it during the project run, but also sort of afterwards to keep people in the loop? Had you planned a lot of the updates that you were going to put out in advance of launch, or was that all sort of done in the middle of the campaign?
I love the updates tool, and I didn't plan any of it. It was like when I thought something was exciting that happened that made me want to tell someone, that was the best way for me to do it. And I think people really appreciated the updates. I don't know if they read them now. It's so long. Like I updated it last year when we won a Peabody and got nominated for an Emmy, and it's like so long from the actual launch date of the Kickstarter. But I think people really appreciated them, and I tried to schedule them out so that there weren't a lot of them back to back. Not bombarding people, and making sure that I would make a list of like, oh, this is exciting, this happened, but I'm going to try to get 5 other things that are relevant or exciting that when I send out an update, it can be full, rather than it's just like, here's a one-off thing that they may get tired of reading one-off things. So like making sure it's designed well, it has a nice image, something that's attention grabbing and, bulleted and easy to read. Nothing is going to take a lot of the time. So, but I did a lot of updates. I loved updates, especially while I was in the field shooting, because, these people they were the only reason I was there. So I just wanted them to be able to see the photos of like the residents that we were actually working with, that it wasn't just a project on the web. It was actually like in a community, and that was really cool. So.
And when you were putting together your rewards, were there any surprises in what ended up being really popular, or anything that that grabbed your attention from that experience?
Yeah, well, I have a friend named Nathaniel Hansen who does he's done several Kickstarters and he's advised on Kickstarter campaigns. And he told me a really good piece of advice, which is that if you have your rewards, you know, we had like DVDs and photos and postcards and all that stuff. That's pretty normal. But have a couple sort of gems that you'll pop in the middle of the campaign or towards the end of the campaign that allow people not to donate a ton more, but to raise their donation maybe $50 more, $25 more, and they get a really nice book or whatever it is. And so like drop these little gems in the middle by just updating the rewards. And so we did that several times, and a lot of people would update their rewards. Another thing that's funny about, it's not necessarily rewards related, but you know, there's this sort of celebrity side of Kickstarter that you want people with a lot of followers on Twitter to share it, and you want to try to find the people that care about the issue but also have a strong voice. And so I was living in Boston doing the Kickstarter. I can't believe I'm telling this story, but it shows how desperate I was. And I went to Morgan Spurlock is from West Virginia, and so I went to a screening of his latest film, and I chased him out of the theater. This is during the Kickstarter campaign with a DVD, and was like, Morgan, like, you know, I'm from West Virginia, you know, to come look at this. And he thought I was a crazy person. And so he ignored me. But then Jeff, my designer, was with me, and he said something like, it's from West Virginia. And he stopped and he took it. And he's like, I can't talk. I'm getting ready to catch an airplane. And then he ended up tweeting about it later. And like, that was, like, I felt like a total idiot doing that. But like, actually, a lot of people found us from that single tweet. And so I guess the piece of advice is think of the things you can do in real life, not just online, to get people to come to the project as well.
I love that story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, so in terms of like embedding yourself in the community, and you know, you're from West Virginia and from the town over, but you were living in Boston at the time. Like, how do you, as a creator, fully immerse yourself in a community? And you know, your project is so special in that, like, you're really inviting the people to take part in what you're making. But what are your tips on just throwing yourself into a space where you're asking people to be part of something with you?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that right now. I'm trying to throw myself in a community that's not mine. And so it's very challenging. I think the most important thing for me before you dive into any one community is to understand the context, to read the books, watch the movies that have been made about that place. And because the thing is, like, and the articles, the news videos, because the people there are really sensitive to media. In McDowell, they're extremely sensitive because right before I came, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation came, and like, it was a horrible, horrible coverage of the area. I mean, it just looked like the worst place on the planet. And they even like said it was just really terrible. And so I knew, like, because I was so up on like what was being said about this place, I could sympathize with them about this and we could talk about it. So having touch points that are recent, you know, like this just happened. I knew Alan, the guy I was interviewing, the following week after that, he was in the video and he was going to be really sensitive to this. And the fact that I was coming in with a camera, I'm the same as this other person. Like, they don't know they can trust me anymore. And I think it takes time. Like, you just, you know, like I said, I lived there for 5 or 6 months and spent every single day going out, finding people and spending more time with people. And I think just showing that you're there day after day, showing up, even if nothing's happening, or if you like, you know, put down your camera and help people if they need help, and they'll show you a much richer side of their life if you're helping them. So yeah, I think that makes a big difference. And also, you know, when you're going to a community that's not yours, find the leaders and the, you know, the people, the nonprofits that work with the communities, and maybe offer up some of your photographs for them, you know, or do something that helps them and doesn't just take from the community. I think that's a big part of it if you were trying to earn trust. So.
And what, maybe this is a hard question to answer, but what medium do you feel most comfortable working in? I mean, you have such an amazing handle on film, and you're also an audio storyteller and journalist.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it depends on my mood. I'm pretty comfortable. I like the uncomfortableness of jumping from one to the other. That's the challenge. You know, that's the fun part. It's trying to figure out, you know, what makes a good 30-minute podcast episode versus what makes a great multimedia story, or something that's just like photo and audio and text, like what portions of the story do you put in the text versus in the audio, and how much do you need to show in the photos if you're providing the context in the text. So I love that. I mean, moving image is my love. I'm obsessed with moving image, and I still am like study film every day. It's just something that I just am very captivated with, the idea of life moving in front of the lens, and that's why stills have never been enough for me. I've always just been really drawn to that medium. But then if you think about it, there's, Hollow's a certain type of documentary. So like there's all kinds of new styles of documentary to explore beyond the portrait style, one person portrait like Hollow is. So I think moving image is something I'm the most comfortable in, but I also like to challenge myself within the moving image to make sure I'm not making the same type of work over and over. Make something that's a little bit more, I don't know, vague sometimes, not so obvious that this coal town's dying, but maybe it's just an experience where you're just following someone, or make something a little bit more abstract. So yeah, I would say that. But I started in writing actually, and I always wanted to be a writer. And then I don't know what really happened, but I picked up a camera, and then I just enjoyed it so much better. I don't think I was that good of a writer, honestly. I think that's what it was. I was better at following other things than like coming up with ideas in my own head. So.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your upcoming project is that you're working on now?
Sure. So I'm doing a podcast. We've been doing it since January. My friend Sarah Ginsberg and we interview a woman every single week. Well, we interview them in advance, but we release them every week about women in media. And then on the off weeks, we feature women musicians. And so that was a project that we started because after Hollow, it was such a big project, and I really didn't expect it to get the attention it did and the awards it did. And it was kind of paralyzing after that, trying to figure out what to do next. It was like, none of these ideas are as good as that one. And so I was like, how do other women navigate this creative time where you're in between projects and trying to figure out what next to devote 2 years of your life to, because that's the reality of making documentaries. So now after the podcast, after doing it for a year, I feel pretty comfortable diving in some new things. I'm going back to the community that Hollow, that's featured in Hollow, and working on a VR project with some high school students there about the opportunities and lack of opportunities available for teenagers in coal country. So that will be following them as they lead up to graduation. That's in pre-production right now, trying to fundraise for that. And then I'm also spending a big part of this year working, so much of the story of Appalachia, which is the region that I'm documenting, is white and poor. That's the stereotype. And there's much more diversity here. And so this year I've sort of made it my goal to explore that diversity a bit more, and what is the Latino experience in Appalachia. And so we moved to Tennessee recently. And so I'm working with some nonprofits there to explore that experience of what the Hispanic Appalachian experience is there. So yeah, that's all I can say right now because it's such early stages.
Yeah. And have you found that, you said that after the Kickstarter project had finished, all the backers were really wonderful in helping sort of spread the word once it was out in the world. Have you found that this is a community that you'll be able to sort of bring with you to your next project, or how does that communication look like?
For sure. I mean, when we went to South by, I stayed on the couch of some guy who was my Kickstarter. He's not some guy, he's a friend now, but a guy that I met as a Kickstarter backer. He was a West Virginia native who moved to Austin. He was like, oh, you can stay on my couch. And like, there's been many instances like that. Anna Sale, who's the host of Death, Sex, and Money at WNYC, we had her on the show, but I met her because she donated to Kickstarter, and now, we're good friends like that. So yeah, it extends far beyond. And it also, with the community and even some of the residents donated. And that was really cool because not only are they donating their time, but they've offered up money to donate to this. And like, that was tremendous and shows a huge amount of dedication. So yeah, it goes beyond. The Kickstarter campaign doesn't end when the Kickstarter campaign ends, like the actual date. It actually just begins there. And the rewards and making sure that you're following up and doing what you said you're going to do is really important to make sure that those people come along with you on your next projects. And absolutely. I think the people, I've actually been trying to figure out how to migrate those people onto, do you put them in a mailing list? There's all kinds of questions I have about how to make sure those people stay in my network, because they're really important to this project and my future projects.
And did you have any, like, with the sort of fulfillment of rewards and all that, or do you have any advice on rewards, planning them, and then sort of, having gone through the fulfillment process, any tips that you could offer on that front?
I think postage is expensive. I also think as many digital things that you can provide, digital gifts, would be good. I think Jeff and I ended up, I think maybe Trisha helped too, but we ended up writing out like, I don't know, close to like 400 postcards, like thank you cards, like writing a message on every single one of them. And I mean, it took us half a summer to do that. And while I really enjoyed it, I'm glad we did it. I think other people, I've gotten postcards from Kickstarter backers that are smarter than I am, just like a generic thank you, not like write this whole message. So I guess just think about the value versus your time, and make sure that you're budgeting the right amount of money for the expenses that are going to go into making that reward. But I think, like, if you're doing books and DVDs, I would say if they come in early, so if you have the hollow DVD that won't come out until later, just ask the person, do you mind if we ship all your rewards at once rather than shipping them 4 times when we get things along the way? So thinking about those things, keeping down costs and making sure you're being wise with your time, because your time is not supposed to be spent wrapping gifts. It's supposed to be spent making a film. And so you have to be smart about what you're promising. Yeah, I think that would be my only suggestion.
That's great. And then maybe in the last couple of minutes that we have left here, you could tell us a little bit about what you think the future of, this is going to be one of those questions, the future of like interactive documentary looks like for you. I mean, what are you most excited about, I guess, when you think about creating an interactive experience with documentary film?
Well, I think after creating the interactive doc, I was really craving books again and films. And I think the interactive doc has changed since we launched Hollow. I'm seeing a lot more data-driven interactive docs and less about people's faces and people's hearts and people's stories, which I don't like. I think that the field really needs to push what cinema is going to look like online. And so I still really enjoy the interactive form, but I think moving forward, my goal is to, if I were to make Hollow today, it'd be completely different. I just know so much more about how the form works, and I just understand it better. And, I was really relying on Jeff and the 2 developers I was like a blind person, making films, like, how do we make this thing? And like, none of us knew really how to make it. We just were doing it. And now I think the most important thing is to, Hollow's a 3-hour experience. It's a 3-hour interactive doc. I think now, thinking of things that are serialized, where we've seen the success of serialized stuff, thinking about releasing things over time and how that would have been easier for actually our timeline if we didn't just jam it all into one date. And so thinking about that, and then thinking about, the linear side of things and how it can travel without me. The interactive doc can't travel alone. It has to be me in front of a crowd performing it every single, all 80 screenings I did. And so I think, like, thinking about your project and how it can be part of people's lives in a communal space beyond just the laptop is something that I think is important and something I'm going to explore. I have skepticism, but also excitement for VR and virtual reality. So I'm excited to experiment with it and test its limits. But I think we put too much hope into every new medium. We're like, the VR is the empathy machine now, and before that, interactive documentaries were going to change the way education was going to be done. And it really is not about the technology at all. It's about what you do with it. And so that's just where I am. That's where I'm excited to play around with and find collaborators that know more than I do to teach me things. And I'll bring the story to the table and they help me figure out how to tell it. So
I love that. I think that's actually a really perfect way to end this. Elaine, thanks so much for hanging out with us. It's been really great to chat with you and hear a little bit about your work. And I guess we'll sign off.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.